Hello, everyone. Welcome to CAF News. My name is Kevin Donovan. I'm here with Bryce, and today we are going a step beyond maybe the usual AI. Is it accelerating? Is it decelerating? Who's doing what? We're going to be talking more about kind of a front row seat to a bigger rewrite of power, progress. What we're seeing in just the pace of innovation and how AI is driving what we'll probably refer to as stacked futures on CAF News today. Bryce, how you doing?
Doing really great, Kim. A great introduction. And, the interesting thing too, I think we're going to start with an AI generated website about the state of AI. So
Let's
is
do
this
it.
here, is this here with us? And so we went to the Replit website maker, I guess, and said, what can you come up with around the state of AI these days? Right. So I'm just going to share the screen here. And people are talking, as we're talking about stuff, we're seeing a little bit of a bull market right now with, companies like NVIDIA are starting to accelerate, the Magnificent Seven, coming up. And I think people are saying, well, is this real? Is it just a fad? And I don't think this is in any sense a fad. I think it's definitely real when you start to look at the numbers in perspective and put it into context so that AI isn't just about AI. So, we bring up some of the numbers, when you look at some of this stuff, you're talking about, 81 million H100 equivalents. That's a huge amount of compute going in place. And we actually have this one too, which talks about capacity. The growth multiplier in the near future is absolutely huge. And if we look at some of the countries that are leading right now, it's interesting. The top two, United States and the United Arab Emirates, according to this chart, which doesn't surprise me, both heavy innovators investing in technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about it. This boom is not just AI or software eating the world. It seems like it's going beyond to combine beyond digital, a huge shift in physical infrastructure um,
Well,
from
you're right on
transition
there,
to
Kevin.
terawatts.
You're right on. Like we say AI revolution, but really it's the convergence of a whole heap of technologies that are coming to the forefront. It's not all of a sudden, somebody like, OpenAI had this idea, we're just going to do OpenAI, and here we are. There's a silicon revolution happening, while this is all in place. I mean, if you just look at the silicon part of this, we're now outpacing Moore's law,
Yeah,
massively,
yeah.
which is unthinkable. And we're not just blowing it out of the water; like it's left behind now, right? Like things are really starting to
In
accelerate.
training compute alone is doubling every 6 months, faster than
Yes,
Moore's law. Yeah,
yes.
yeah, crazy.
And I think the other thing is we're finding that well, I mean, there's two trends. There's sort of an economic trend, where is this going, that we definitely want to touch on. But I think just to finish off this convergence of technologies, we're seeing some advances in the silicon that aren't just going to aid, artificial intelligence. For instance, we're seeing the emergence of photonic computing. We talked about on an earlier, discussion. That's coming
Mhm.
out. What does that really mean? Like light-based photonics is able to leverage a lot of these legacy chip manufacturing sites. It turns out that you need a certain size of fabrication facility for your silicon transistors in these chips. Turns out that some of the older fabrication plants can be reused and adapted for photonic computing. Huge win. And I think the other thing that we're really moving into this, which is going to be really big, is some of the notions around energy consumption. I think as we go forward, we are going to hit an energy wall, but I don't think conserving it or putting windmills up is going to be the answer. I think we really are going to see accelerated forms of energy consumption come out, like fusion. Um, I think that, for instance, Helion's Polaris project. I
Yeah,
mean, it's they're forecasting in the next 5 years to come online with a commercial working fusion reactor.
yeah.
And I think all these things go in parcel, because now you're using the AI to design these reactors and it's really just accelerating, not to mention other things like quantum computing, right, that are coming through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, plus all of the money that's flowing into it. I mean, who isn't announcing an AI campus or an AI initiative or a, with some double-digit billion-dollar amount of funding? Um, I, th- I actually don't remember. I should have saved the source, but similar to how early in the days of the internet, there was all this talk of like, the amount of data produced since the Stone Age until now, just doubled in
Yeah.
the last 2 years or something. Same thing is happening with compute. The amount of compute that ever existed is now doubling in the next 6, 9 months, something like this. And
Yes.
it's on, an exponential curve,
And
which of
really,
course is going to demand incredible amounts of power.
and people don't really, just to take an analogy here, people, when you hear doubling well, it's doubling, big deal. But we don't think of what it really means is in that period of time, it means you're going to learn more than you learned in all of human history before that time. And that really
It
puts a
certainly could.
sobering perspective on it. I think in terms of dollars, there was an estimate from McKinsey that by 2030, they're looking at $500 billion a year in annual research value for AI, $500 billion for the market growing. And in a similar time frame, quantum is expected to be up to 100 billion, by 2030.
Hmm.
So now, if you look at this, you look at the investment, and I think what this also means is more use cases where we can use this material, right? Like, I mean, what's the real value of quantum as it takes these exponentially hard problems that, they just grow with complexity, and now we can solve them in polynomial time. So they don't grow exponentially, they grow with some factor. And now, we can start to look at some problems that even like last year were unsolvable, right? Which, I mean, we talk, one of the big ones, of course, is post-quantum cryptography and what's happening there, what that's
Yeah.
enabling.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The whole, AI eating the world. WWW used to be World Wide Web. The W3 consortium might turn into Watts wires and wafers as everything becomes constrained by power, chips, and infrastructure. It's yeah,
And
optimizing for thermodynamics and power density, not certainly not lines of code anymore.
and as you start to look, what are we really doing with AI? Just, a couple of points, So just recently, an AI-based system has been able to actually snip the defective chromosomes associated with Down syndromes out of a DNA
Yeah,
and fix it. That's
right.
like that is unbelievable. I mean, I didn't a year ago. I would have expected that to be in the again 2030s, 2040s, right?
Yeah.
It's I don't know. So what do you think this all means for architects, Kevin?
Well, yeah, how does it come back to architecture? I mean, obvious implications for workloads and infrastructure. The cloud, everybody always knew it was someone else's computer, but it was somewhat invisible. Now it's got its own, cooling source and a zip code. Um, so yeah, the implications for how you need to be looking at and what you need to be looking at are all changing. Distance, latency, edge computing becomes much more important. Um, Small language models that fit on small devices to do local inference is, becoming more and more important. And then what you're doing and how you're doing it, starts to tie into everything around sustainability. And because, yeah, everything will become power constrained. So you need to start looking at power constraints. And I think that's going to be an important part. Of course, any of these providers will abstract that away for you, hopefully. But then, you're on their platform also. So I think people need to be cognizant of what is going on and what choices are being made. But yeah, it's a good question. There are probably ramifications that we don't even know yet.
I like your catch on sustainability. I think it's going to be a time phase sort of thing, right? As we're waiting for these newer energy technologies to be adopted. I think you're right. It's going to be who can do like a more efficient chip, more energy efficient, you know, com, you know, floating point operations or you know, inferences per second. Who can do the best with this
Yeah,
is going to be the at lowest power consumption. But I think that's going to change at some point in the not too distant future when we get better energy sources. And I think the other point that really comes out of this is AI isn't just like, again, it's not just AI. It's the convergence of technologies. It's the silicon manufacturing. It's what people like NVIDIA have done. There's cooling systems behind it that are going forward. There's, I think the AI is being used they're turning it on chip design to give us better chips going forward,
sure.
accelerating that, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, ultimately, it'll be interesting too. I like your take on the small language models, moving that to the edge for more real-time behavior. And what are the use cases that does? And I think as architects, I think we're going to be a lot more, just get your thought on this, Kevin. I think we're going to be a lot more use case focused and really trying to match the types of systems that we need with the right thing. I think it's going to be architecture, I think is going to move up to a higher level with value traceability, outcome measurement, and delivery of those things versus detailed, like the architecture as DevOps, I think is going to sort of get pushed down the stack. But I don't know. Do you think we're always going to need that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you do, but I think you're right. As with every improvement, I mean, even looking at languages, moving from assembler to Fortran to what they called 4GL languages, you moved up in abstraction, um, and it's not that you could forget compilation or translation, depending on your the flavor you like. But you didn't, everybody didn't have to pay attention to that any longer. And I think something very similar, but much larger, is happening now where, you know, we were talking about how does this affect architects, and of course you have to think about workloads and where you're executing those workloads and edge computing. You have to think about sustainability if we're all going to escape some kind of or not be so constrained. But everyone is also looking, at least right now today, every board wants to know what's our AI strategy. But I think what you're pointing to there is interesting because AI is not the destination; it's more the launch pad. And you will be focusing quite a bit more on what we always should focus on, the use cases and how to support them, the capabilities that support those use cases, and then the functionality that is then providing that capability. And if you can have that kind of clear lens, then where AI can support that begins to shape out fairly, at least with more clarity, I think, than a lot of people approach it today, with the what is our AI strategy kind of, frenzy that you see out there.
I think you hit a really great point, Kevin. And to extend that, I think when you start talking, what is your AI strategy, is also going to overlap into a lot of traditional areas like legacy modernization. And as we start to use
Good point.
AI, we're starting to see the adoption of artificial intelligence to really help, understand, a legacy system, what it meant, in terms of, there's a lot of subject matter expertise embedded in the app that it can actually reverse engineer and help go forward with replatforming or recoding.
Hmm.
And I think that's going to be a huge thing in terms of it's going to open up doors for us as architects to be able to do things that we've talked about, but they were just too prohibitive.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I haven't dug into that space now in, a long time, as in 12 to 18 months, but I have to think that that has changed radically. There was all this transcompilation of Java code, of COBOL code to Java or something similar. Um, yeah, I've got to think that you could throw 10 million lines of COBOL at an LLM and it would be able to tell you what the main pieces of functionality are, and what the downstream dependencies are, and what the internal dependencies are, which in COBOL is always a problem. And probably pretty cleanly also. So instead of just rewriting in another language, the Satya Nadella, SAS is going away. Maybe COBOL is just going away. Because you can just recreate the functionality that's necessary. That's there's got to be some really significant and interesting developments out there. Anybody listening, by all means, pop into the comments and give us some pointers. Love to take a look at some of the latest, greatest state of the art there.
Yeah, I'm aware of two avenues for, I think some of the earlier work looked at like, oh, how do we just convert COBOL to Java using an LLM? And there's this joke, they called it JOBOL code because it just sort of looked like the COBOL sort of Java-fied or something, right?
Yeah.
Which, and then people started to use this, I think, and again, this is wrongly using this as a criticism of what you can do with AI because it picked a limited approach to start with. And the other side I've seen to this is people that have actually started to reverse engineer their legacy applications and then start to rebuild them, not from a coding perspective, but from a domain-driven design perspective.
Yeah.
And starting to pull that out. And like you say, I'd love to hear about other takes on this. And even those, if anybody's doing them, it would be great to see what's happening out there. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Good discussion, Kevin, and comments down below.
Yeah,
Please.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating time. We're not just watching revolutions; we're standing in the middle of it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens as technology and hopefully humans kind of evolve together in this stacked future. So yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.